The OCD and Anxiety Podcast by Robert James Coaching. Hello and welcome to the OCD and Anxiety Podcast, where we explore how to have a more positive relationship with anxiety disorders, taking back control so that you can start living the life you choose and not the one chosen by your fears. Hello and welcome to episode 389. I hope that you're doing very well today. However, if you are struggling with OCD or anxiety, you can get a free session with me. To get that, you can head over to my website, robertjamescoaching.com. There you can book in for that free session, or if you prefer, you can just send me a message and let me know about what you're struggling with. In today's podcast, I'm going to be talking about the importance of taking action, of kind of not waiting to kind of feel just right, or to feel perfect, or to feel a certain kind of way before taking action in your life. And OCD is really good at kind of stopping us from taking that action. We tend to believe that we need to feel right before we can do things. And I think this is part of the kind of process in a way that keeps us stuck with OCD. So it's really important to take some action with it. If you find the podcast helpful, it would be great if you could follow and like on Instagram. My Instagram handle is at Robert James Coaching UK. Also, the podcast is now on YouTube as well. So if you'd like to follow there, you can. I really hope that you enjoy. If you have any questions at all about anything I speak about today, don't hesitate to get in touch. And off we go. Many thanks. Here are some quotes to get us started today. The first is by Pablo Picasso. Action is the foundational key to all success. This is obviously quite a clear and obvious statement. Really, we have to have action in order to have any success at all. We actually have to get out there into the world and, start taking action. And unfortunately, OCD is really, really good at stopping us from doing that. The second quote is by Tony Robbins. The path to success is to take massive, determined actions. And, again, I really like this quote. It's very simple and straightforward, and how often is it the case that with OCD, unfortunately, we're kind of doing the opposite of that. We're taking, no action because we feel that the OCD is so powerful, so strong, that the obsessions are, really limiting us to the point where, we can end up feeling that we're not able to take the action that we need to take to be able to do the exposure work, or to lean into the discomfort, to practice diffusion techniques, to meditate, or to start exercising, whatever it is that you might be working on to try to help you with your wellness, or with your ability to kind of deal with discomfort and manage the OCD more effectively. Unfortunately, OCD is very, very sneaky and very, very good at kind of persuading us that we shouldn't take action, that actually, action is only going to cause us more discomfort. It's going to make the OCD worse, so we shouldn't do that at all. And it's part of the kind of OCD trap, that I think is a big part of the OCD process. It's so annoying. OCD traps us. It makes us feel like, we can't, whatever we do, it's not going to work. The things that we're trying to do so often, which is more often than not, thinking about it more, trying to figure it out, trying to get reassurance in different ways. It feels like those are the things that we're doing to try to manage it. Of course, those things are actually compulsions, and they're just making the OCD worse. And so, it feels like the action we are taking isn't really working. And when you're really stuck with OCD, and maybe you haven't experienced the benefits that you can get from things like exposure or acceptance commitment therapy, when you're just starting out with it, it can be very difficult to believe that anything is going to help you. Those things really do help. They have a lot of research to back them up. But, when you're really in the thick of it, when you're really struggling with it, it can be so hard to believe that actually, if I do this activity, it is going to help me to feel better. It's very tempting to just kind of sit back and say, well, I'm just going to avoid these things because they make me feel very uncomfortable. I don't want to step out and deal with that. So I'm just going to avoid it. And, that's going to make life easier. And unfortunately, the more that we do that, the smaller our lives start to become. And again, this is a very typical thing within OCD. Certainly, I remember when I was really struggling in my 20s with OCD, this was one of the things that I think was kind of holding me back, is that I was always wanting to feel a certain kind of way before taking action. And I'd kind of persuaded myself, that feeling that I was experiencing was a barrier to my success, that until I could get rid of that feeling or feel better about it, there was no point in taking any action, because the feeling, the uncomfortable feeling and the thoughts was the problem. Until they were gone, I wasn't going to take any action. And this is a really typical thing, I think, within OCD. You may not be quite as stuck as I was, or you may be more stuck than I was. Obviously, everyone's situation is different, but ultimately it comes back to that kind of thing, and where you fall on that kind of spectrum of how hard that might have been or might be for you today, is really dependent on, your personal situation, where you are in terms of learning to kind of manage OCD and do exposure work or work with a therapist or whatever you might be doing. And so it's so important that we recognize that this is a really big part of the process of getting over OCD, is actually taking action when you would really rather not, when you're really actually feeling that the anxiety is winning today. This is, I feel so uncomfortable. I'm just going to avoid that thing, or I'm not going to do this, or I'm going to get the reassurance, or I'm going to perform this compulsion. We'd rather kind of take that easy way out a lot of the time with OCD, because of course the compulsions are the familiar things, the things that we've been doing for a long time. They give us reassurance. They make us feel better in the short term. When we perform a compulsion, we do actually get a payoff. In the short term, we feel slightly better. It gives us a sense of control. But we know in the long term, all that's actually happening is we're reinforcing the OCD. And so, this idea of taking action is very much focusing on action that is actually going to help with the OCD, rather than focusing on the typical behaviors that are generally keeping us stuck, the compulsions. And the action, in my experience, it kind of needs to focus on recognizing that actually we're not going to feel better in the short term a lot of the time. That even if we're feeling very uncomfortable in the moment, stepping out and trying to do things a bit differently, despite the fact that you're feeling uncomfortable, is often a way that you can find a way through that discomfort and to begin to experience and then ultimately to begin to accept it. Acceptance is obviously a very key word when it comes to anxiety and OCD. Really, I think this is what we're kind of up to, is we're learning how to experience difficult emotions, difficult situations, and, allowing ourselves to experience those things without getting so annoyed and frustrated about them being present all the time. To kind of acknowledge that anxiety and discomfort is actually a normal part of life, that, if something is very anxiety inducing or difficult for you, is bringing up other difficult emotions, it's not necessarily a bad thing. Often it's pointing to something that's important to you in some way, or something that that you really want to achieve in your life. And maybe you're just trying to leave your house a little bit quicker because you don't want to check things as much, or maybe you're not wanting to go back and repeat something for the fifth time. Maybe you are just wanting to kind of stop ruminating about something. but there's this nagging feeling of, yeah, but this is really uncomfortable. I don't want to just leave the house, or I don't want to just stop ruminating because I just want to think about this just a bit more, or I just want to get that certainty and check one more time, and we don't want to kind of do the thing that we know we should, which is to allow that little bit of uncertainty and to take action, to step out into our lives, and to not get that reassurance by checking it again, to not ruminate about it again, but to accept the fact that, yeah, we are feeling a bit anxious in that moment, and that's okay, and that we're able to step out into our lives anyway and take positive action despite the fact that we might be feeling uncomfortable in that moment. And this is so, so important, this concept, when we're able to recognize that is what we have to do, and we practice this and we start demonstrating to ourselves that we can do it, that we can actually, get back into our lives and start living it in a positive way, despite the anxiety being present sometimes. And when we do that, we also demonstrate to ourselves that anxiety actually comes down eventually. It may come down fairly quickly sometimes once you start taking action, or other times it may take a bit longer. But anxiety doesn't just stay the same. And, when we actually refocus our attention onto other things and we come more into the present moment, well, generally what tends to happen is that the anxiety will begin to settle down because you're no longer focused on it quite so much. You're not so fixated and obsessed on the obsession itself. You're actually beginning to move your attention elsewhere. And when we do that, I think the body begins to just kind of to take over a little bit. We're not so stuck in our heads. We're able to come into the body and we're able to be more in the present. And when we do this, we become a bit more accepting. And as I was saying before, it really is so much of OCD is about bringing acceptance to these difficult emotional states. And one of the best ways I've found of doing that is actually taking action, getting out there into our lives, reflecting on what's really important to us, and then taking that action, to kind of live our lives by those things that are important to us. And when we do this, things do begin to change little by little. And, really what I'm talking about here is, very much related to acceptance commitment therapy, as you've probably heard me talking about a lot before on the podcast. ACT has been something that's been very, very helpful for me over the years with my own struggles with OCD, and there's this kind of phrase taken from ACT. I'm paraphrasing a little bit, but it's something along the lines of get back into your life and bring the difficult emotions, the thoughts, anything else along for the ride. Meaning that you don't need to get rid of these things in order for you to start taking action in your life and to start living today. And I think it's a really powerful message taken from acceptance commitment therapy. It really does work. And also when you think about the goal of doing exposure work, so often with exposure, what we're actually doing is we're just trying to feel the difficult emotions that we're experiencing. Okay, with exposure, it's obviously different from acceptance commitment therapy. Really, what we're trying to do is to learn how to habituate to the difficult emotion by bringing it up on purpose and then sitting with that difficult emotion and learning how to feel it. We start off very gently with that, trying to experience the more difficult emotions in a controlled way, not trying to have something that's too powerful, but learning how to feel those emotions in a positive way, learning how to just sit with them and to be patient with them and to acknowledge that with time, the difficult emotions, the anxiety will begin to come down. With acceptance commitment therapy, you're tending to kind of take more action. So you're acknowledging that the difficult emotions are there. Maybe you'll try to feel them a little bit and just come into the body for a few seconds and pay attention. But then it's very much about refocusing your attention back onto your values, back onto your goals and, what's most important to you. And so often when we do this, the anxiety does just begin to come down. What OCD really wants you to be doing, in my experience, is just to be taking no action, to kind of sit there, to think about your fears, to try to figure it all out cognitively, to go over things again and again, to problem solve. And unfortunately, all of these things just are, they're just compulsions. They're just sneaky ways that the OCD, encourages you to kind of do, because it keeps you stuck. OCD just wants you to keep doing the thing that you've been doing habitually for a long time, because, well, it just wants you to keep doing OCD because that's kind of familiar. That's comfortable. When we actually step out and take action, that can be, a little bit more uncomfortable sometimes, because maybe we're not so used to it. We may be more used to just kind of thinking about our fears all the time and ruminating or checking things or whatever your compulsions might be. And so, there's this resistance sometimes that comes up when we think about taking positive action and focusing on our values. But it's very helpful if you can to just observe that resistance. This is something that Stephen Pressfield talks about in The War of Art. When he speaks about creativity, he says that any time that you sit down to do something that's important to you, resistance comes up or a sense of anxiety comes up, and you're kind of, you find all sorts of reasons to procrastinate and to not do the thing that will actually make you feel better. And I think it's quite similar sometimes in this situation. We kind of know on some level that taking action, going out and doing something, going for a walk, or, just getting up and cleaning the house and focusing on movement, listening to music, whatever it might be. We know that these things are going to bring us more into the body and kind of draw us out of the head and help us. But for some reason, so often we don't quite want to do that. There's that resistance that comes up. And so if you can, try to observe that resistance, pay attention to it, feel it in the body if you can. Observe it, but don't allow it to dictate your life and how you're going to kind of respond to OCD moving forward. See if you can have a different perspective on that. When that urge comes up and says, no, just sit here, keep thinking about it. Can you instead just kind of gently remind yourself that perhaps that is the OCD, and perhaps if you get up and start taking action, you might start, feeling a bit better about that anxiety, and perhaps that anxiety will begin to come down a little bit. So there we go, guys. I really hope that you enjoyed that one. If you have any questions at all, do please let me know, and I will see you next time. Just a quick reminder that if you want to get a free session, all you need to do to get that is to head over to my website, www.robertjamescoaching.com. And there you can leave me a message and we can arrange the free session. And now just a quick reminder of my disclaimer. Any information that you view on my website, Instagram page, Facebook group, or anywhere else online, or any information that you listen to on the podcast is for informational purposes only and is not intended to be a substitute for actual medical or mental health advice from a doctor, psychologist, or any other medical or mental health professional.